Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Saiful Bazli bin Sufarin. My student ID is 23B1004. In this video, we will be discussing about the meaning of Mafhum Mukhalafah inside the Holy Book of Islam, which is the Al-Quran Al-Karim, and its implication in Al-Hukum Syar'Iyy. The concept of Mafhum Mukhalafah, which is the opposition or contradiction, which relates a significant relevance in many intellectual domains, specifically in legal discourse, where it serves as a methodology for interpretation and analysis in the Al-Quran. Introduction. The interpretation of the holy verses of the Al-Quran is inseparable to the Al-Quran itself. This is because the interpretation is an explanation of the meanings or the purposes of the Quranic verses. Al-Quran frequently uses terminology that are difficult from what society understands, particularly during the time and location where it was revealed. In several places, Al-Quran only discusses broad concepts and prohibition. As a result, verses or pronunciation must be interpreted in order for people to understand the message, intent, and purposes of the Quranic verses. When discussing about the Al-Quran verses, it becomes noticeable that not all of the verses provide a clear meaning. Many verses require a detailed explanation of the laws. This shows that the verses of Al-Quran not only convey explicitly and clear understanding, but also hint meanings that require a special attention. Mafhum Mukhalafah is a methodology for proving a hukum by using the opposite meaning of the hukum as explicitly stated in the text, which is the Al-Quran. It is also known as Dalil al-Khitab, or an indirect evidence of the Al-Quran. The Hanafis reject this way of proving a hukum, while the Shafi'is, on the other hand, divided into various groups of Mafhum Mukhalafah, which can be known as number 1, Mafhum Laqab, number 2, Mafhum As-Sifah, 3, Mafhum Ash-Shart, 4, Mafhum Al-Ghayah, and number 5, Mafhum Al-Adad. These groups of Mafhum Mukhalafah will be explained briefly later.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Syar'Iyy bin Rosli. My student ID is 23B0822, and today I will be explaining about the definition of Mafhum al-Mukhalafah. The literal meaning of Mafhum is understanding the common meaning, while the literal meaning of al-Mukhalafah is divergence, which comes from the root word khalafa. The word khalafa can give out different meaning based on people's interpretation. However, when these two words combine, the meaning it can give out the different meaning, which is highlighting the importance of focusing on the unclear meaning, which is called the indirect meaning, and it is conclude from the counter indication meaning.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Khairul Hamizan Shah bin Suriman, 23B0815. So let's move on to our next content, which is the types of Mafhum Mukhalafah. So the first type of Mafhum Mukhalafah is called Mafhum Laqab. What is Mafhum Laqab? Mafhum Laqab means that it is a hukum that is rise because of an existing proper noun or a specific name that exists in the context, in the text. For example, from a Quranic ayah, A'udhu billahi minasyaitanir rajim, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Hurrimat alaykum ummahatikum, which translate to forbidden unto you are your mothers. It prohibits us from marrying our own mothers. So the specific name in this ayat is mothers. So by way of Mafhum Mukhalafah, it is permitted to marry everyone that we like other than our mothers. So this Mafhum Laqab, most scholars does not agree the usage of this Mafhum Mukhalafah. Why? Because from the example that I've given, we can marry everyone that we like other than our own mothers. That is understanding the ayah by way of Mafhum Mukhalafah. That is the understanding. But in reality, there are a lot of other people that we as Muslim cannot marry. For example, marriage between the same gender. The second type of Mafhum al-Mukhalafah is called Mafhum al-Sifah. So what is Mafhum al-Sifah? Mafhum al-Sifah, it translates to a hukum that is being raised because there is a presence of an attribute or a specific characteristic to a certain category. So an example would be from Surah An-Nisa, verse 25. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن لم يستطع منكم طولا أن ينكح المحصنات المؤمنات فمما ملكت أيمانكم من فتياتكم المؤمنات, which translates to, but if any of you cannot afford to marry a free believing woman, then let him marry a believing bondwoman possessed by one of you. So from this particular ayah, we can see the attribute given to a female slave that is permissible to marry is believing. Believing in this ayat is al-mu'minat. The Mafhum Mukhalafah, by way of Mafhum Mukhalafah, rise from this ayah is that non-believer female, non-mu'minat female slave is not permissible to marry. So what is permissible is believing bondwoman. By way of Mukhalafah, it is not permissible to marry non-believer female. That's all for Mafhum Asifah. Moving on to the third type of Mafhum Mukhalafah, it is called Mafhum Al-Ghayah. So what is Mafhum Al-Ghayah? Mafhum Al-Ghayah, it refers to a hukum being raised because there is a limit stated in the text, and when this limit is exceeded, the opposite hukum is inflicted. So for example, from Surah Al-Baqarah verse 187, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر, which translates to, you may eat and drink until you see the light of dawn breaking the darkness of night. This indicates the limit of eating and drinking during the months of Ramadan is until you see the light of dawn. So by using Mafhum Mukhalafah, it is understood from this text that eating and drinking is prohibited after dawn during Ramadan. Mafhum Ashart is the fourth type of Mafhum al-Mukhalafah. It refers to when a text is delivered with the existence of a condition, same as Malay. It's called syarat. In English, we call it condition. The hukum will be in effect as long as the conditions, the syarat here, are met, and will cease to avoid. So the hukum will cease to be valid when conditions are not met. For instance, from Surah An-Nisa verse 25, just like what I've mentioned before, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن لم يستطع منكم طولا أن ينكح المحصنات المؤمنات فمما ملكت أيمانكم من فتياتكم المؤمنات. But if any of you cannot afford to marry a free believing woman, then let him marry a believing bondwoman possessed by one of you. Through this text, the condition that is presented is, if there is a conditional clauses there, if you cannot afford marrying a free believing woman, then a conditional clauses again, marry your believing bondwoman. If and then in this text indicates the presence of conditional clauses, just like what I've said. So by way of Mafhum Mukhalafah, it is haram to marry a believing bondwoman if it is possible to marry a free believing woman. The last type of Mafhum al-Mukhalafah is called Mafhum al-Adab. So the hukum in this mafhum al-adat, when the text it contains a specific limit in the form of numbers. So just like the mafhum al-ghayah, there is a presence of limitations, but in mafhum al-adat, it is in the form of numbers. It is not permissible and it will be invalid if the amount of numbers exceeds or less than the amount mentioned. As an example from Surah An-Nur, verse number 2, regarding the punishment of those who commit adultery. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما 100 جلدة. As for female and male fornicators, give each one of them 100 lashes. So it is clear in this ayah, the hukum for adulterers, female and male fornicators, it is 100 lashes. So by way of mafhum mukhalafah, then if the numbers of lashes exceeds, or the number of lashes it decrease from this limitation, it is not valid. So if the adulterer being lashed for 105, for example, or the adulterers are being lashed 90 lashes, it is not permissible. This is by way of mafhum mukhalafah. That is all for my part. Let's move on to the next content.
Importance of understanding and knowing Mafhum Mukhalafah in the Al-Quran. Mafhum Mukhalafah in the Al-Quran highlights the importance of understanding this topic in order to fully understand the messages or lessons stated in the Al-Quran. The knowledge of Mafhum Mukhalafah will keep someone from making mistakes when understanding the pronunciation or editorials of the Al-Quran. For an instance, there are some people who argue that committing adultery is not prohibited. This is because the Al-Quran only prohibits for those who engage in it. These misunderstandings, assumptions, comes from a lack of knowledge and understanding Mafhum Mukhalafah and its rules. Opposing this perspective can be difficult without fundamental understanding and basic knowledge of this particular subject. Misunderstandings and inaccuracies in establishing laws based on the Al-Quran can be avoided with adequate learning and knowledge regarding with this topic. The reason is that Mafhum Mukhalafah plays a crucial role in constructing and establishing laws by extracting them from the basis of the Al-Quran.
Next, I will be explaining about the condition for Mafhum al-Mukhalafah. There is 4 types of condition, which is number 1, Mafhum al-Mukhalafah should not disprove the mantuk evidence or Mafhum muwafaqah evidence because both are stronger evidence. Number 2, mantuk is not something that happens so commonly. If the mantuk explains the original law, then the Mafhum al-Mukhalafah cannot be used against the text. Number 3, the mantuk is not used to support evidence. And number 4, which is the last one, the mantuk must be able to stand on its own without relying on others.
To conclude this video, principle of Islamic jurisprudence receive a special attention of its high standing it occupies as a science that discloses the objectives of Sharia texts. Verses of the Al-Quran represent a rich legislative source from which the Muslim can learn about essential and important rulings. In this video, we primarily focus on the implication that is the opposite of the apparent meaning of the text, which is counter-implication, its synonyms and hindrances. In the end, this research, we also mention a number of Quranic verses attesting to the importance of this concept in providing Sharia flexibility and broadening the sources from which Sharia proofs, which is evidence, are derived. And that is all from us. Thank you for watching. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.